I became a vegetarian roughly 20 years ago, largely due to the inspiration of my wife. She asked if we should become vegetarians, and she says I responded, well, I'll never give up my steak. But something inspired me to move forward with that, I think mostly for environmental and humanitarian reasons. And shortly after doing that, about a year or so into it, we met a guy who really had something special about him. He was super fit. He had a kind of a glow to him, and he was more a practicing vegan, and more importantly, about 70% raw. And he said a big influence for him was a book called Fit for Life. And so we grabbed that book, we read it, thought it made a lot of sense. We threw away just about everything that was in our kitchen at the time and started from scratch. And from then on, we started eating organic, at least at home. All of our produce and everything was bought organic, and Tiknata went into the kitchen and started creating vegetarian meals. But still, we maintained a high percentage of raw, about 70 to 75% raw. And we did that for about 5 years. And we found it to be very interesting because I weighed maybe 10 or 15 pounds more than I should, and she was always on the light side. She could never gain weight. And with us both being on the same diet in a period of about a year and a half, I had lost in total, I lost a lot but then regained, but in my final total, I had lost about 15 pounds and she gained about 8 pounds eating the same diet. And we're like, wow, there's really something to this. So we kept pursuing it further and always dabbling in raw foods, but more your standard raw food diet, which unfortunately turns out to be very high in fat. And so we would kind of go in and out of that because it would work for a while, but then we would, not quite find the satisfaction that we were looking for. So we kept searching, and it was a topic that we were very interested in anyway. So we were always reading up on it and learning new things. And then about 5 years ago, Tiknata came across a diet that was really geared towards athletes, but that was also raw. And it was called the 80-10-10 diet, which pretty much means that it's 80% of your calories are going to come from carbohydrates, 10% or less for fats, and then 10% or less proteins. And she started on that before I did and had an excellent summer of training and ran a personal best in the marathon. And so that was quite convincing for me to have someone right there getting excellent results. So then in a short period of time after the marathon in August, about 5 years ago, we actually got a chance to go see Doug Graham live. And he was a very inspiring speaker. He's about mid-50s and just absolutely ripped from head to foot in an excellent condition. And it definitely inspired us, and he brought to light several points in the raw world that we didn't quite pick up on before. And one of the first questions he asked is, which do you think is better, whole foods or refined foods? And of course, almost 100% of the people are going to answer whole foods. And then he started picking out a few foods that we would consider whole foods that were far from it. One very controversial one would be olive oil. We consider that to be a pretty healthy food. But then when he shed the light on it, that pretty much it's as refined as it gets. You've taken the olive and you've stripped away everything except for the fat. And so there were several foods like this that he brought to our attention that we didn't realize that we weren't eating a whole food diet. And then on top of that, he had this formula, this 80-10-10 formula that I mentioned, where you're getting 80% of your calories as carbs, and the key thing is you're keeping your fat below 10% ideally. And really the proteins just kind of fall in from there. And he basically developed a diet after doing research and looking at all these different diets that were out there, even diets that included meats. And most of these well-established nutritionists were recommending, even within their diets, 15% or less in fats. And so he looked at that equation and saw, okay, well, if that's fats, what's the maximum you can get from protein, and figured out what's left beyond that. And that's where he came up with pretty much the equation 80-10-10. He trimmed the fat down a little more from the 15 because he felt like if you really want to reach your athletic potential to keeping your fat below 10% is the ideal. And so we've been striving towards this for over the last 5 years, and it's working really well. Neither one of us have been sick since we went to China, which was about 5 years ago, and we let our regular diet kind of slide, and that's when we found out about 80-10-10 when we came back from there. And both of our athletic performances are going up. And I'm definitely finding in time that there's times when it's very easy to stay strict on the diet, and then there's times when it's really challenging. And I'm learning to give myself that rather than to try to be too austere about it. You know, if I find myself coveting something over there, I just allow myself to have it. But there's many times when I'm just completely satisfied with what I have. And in fact, when I usually show up with a big bowl of fruit, everybody's attention is focused on my big bowl of fruit. So it's been a very satisfying diet, very enjoyable. And like I say, the things that we're getting out of it, I mean, I haven't come close to anything like a cold now in over 5 years. And the athletics are definitely improving, although, you know, with that, I mean, you're not going to get fit from eating a diet. You're not going to get faster from eating a diet, and you're not going to get muscles from eating a diet. So you've got to do the working out and the training as well. So that aspect I'm still working on and developing. Well, that's the really interesting part. I mean, I think that naturally we're driven to eat sweets because our body does very well with carbohydrates and glucogen in particular. And with this diet, you're eating so much fruit that you're satisfying that body's natural drive to get the sweets. And so for us, it's actually very simple to walk by desserts, but it tends to be the savory things that you don't get too often in the raw world that are a little more tempting. So the sweet satisfaction is there. Well, I mean, to say I'm never tempted, that would be ridiculous. Absolutely, I'm tempted. And I even allow myself to have something cooked. It's whether I'm willing to pay the price that I feel in my body for that experience, whether it be for the entertainment of the food or the social situation, if I'm willing to make that trade-off. Because definitely when I'm strict and I allow myself to have a cooked meal, I immediately feel the effects of it in my body. One of the most obvious things is dehydration. If I allow myself to sit down and have like a fully cooked meal, within an hour, I feel incredibly dehydrated. And when I'm strict on this diet, I never feel dehydrated. In fact, I drink very little water because I'm getting so much water from the fruit and from the vegetables. But still, it's definitely a temptation. In terms of what Ayurveda or what other paths teach, you know, I don't want to negate that in any way. I've just found I've tried many things, and there's no question for me when I'm strict about this diet what my body wants. As soon as I go off of that, you know, in a very small way, I can feel it right away. It may be a little headache, it may be just a discomfort throughout the body, or it may be as extreme as dehydration, which is, you know, a bad thing for the body. I mean, people die from dehydration. So you want to experience that as little as possible. Well, it's interesting. I mean, the way this diet is set up, you're not really looking to exclude anything. You're looking to increase the percentage of what you really want to eat and what the body's really craving. In terms of milk products, I've found from personal experience, I don't do well with them at all. You know, I have immediate effects from mucus to stomach upset to, you know, various other maladies. But again, like I say, our focus isn't what we're not going to eat, it's more on what we want to eat. So for other people, they've got to go at their own pace. They've got to do what's going to make them happy. But if they want to attempt the diet, then you want to do it strictly for a couple of weeks so you can actually feel the effects of the diet and then have a real strong place to come from on whether you want to include those foods or not. So a typical day on this diet for me would be in the morning I would have a very juicy fruit, typically melon in some form, and I like to eat one fruit at a time if I can. And I eat until I'm absolutely full and then maybe eat a little bit more because in the beginning you've got to stretch your stomach to be able to take that food in and take in enough to get the calories that you need. And then for lunch, again, I would have fruit, and I might have, let's say I'm going to have peaches for the day, I might have 8 to 12 peaches, and I would make a meal of that. And then for dinner, I would again start the meal with fruit, probably a very juicy fruit like maybe oranges or peaches again, or whatever's in season. And I would have a little bit of that, not until I'm completely full, but just so I'm somewhat satisfied. And then I would follow that with a large salad. And in that salad will probably be lettuce, cucumber, maybe some tomato, maybe some apple or pineapple. Usually a fruit or two gets mixed in there as well. And then a light dressing might be something like macadamia nuts blended up with a little bit of lemon juice and water. So ideally that evening meal that you have is, you know, before 8 o'clock at night, more ideally like around 6 p.m. But we all know that we live in a very active world, and that's, you know, we can't always have that happen. Of course, a very important element of my health practice, let's say, or my healthy way of living, is a regular practice of meditation. I've been a meditator now for about 19 years, and I feel everything else could go, but I would have to keep my meditation going. It makes me more poised. It helps to direct the energy that I gain from being healthy and gain from eating a healthy diet. And it keeps me more connected to what my heart really wants to do. And so my meditation practice I would put first before any of the athletics or the diet. I would put that as the #1 priority.